When Lisa's car broke down in a tiny mountain town, the last thing she expected was to share a bed with a stranger, or fall in love with him. Lisa was having one of those days where everything goes wrong. She sat in her small Honda, watching the snow fall harder than the weather app had promised. The car had started making that weird noise again, the one her mechanic back in Denver had said wasn't serious. Well, turns out it was pretty serious after all. The engine had died completely just outside a tiny mountain town called Cedar Ridge. Lisa had never heard of this place before today, and now she was stuck here on a Friday evening in late October. The snow was coming down so fast she could barely see the road she'd just been driving on. She grabbed her phone and called the first tow truck number she could find. A friendly voice answered and told her they'd be there in 20 minutes. While she waited, Lisa looked around at the small town spread out below her. It looked like something from a Christmas movie. Tiny houses with warm lights in the windows, a main street with old-fashioned lampposts, and mountains all around covered in fresh snow. The tow truck driver, an older man named Pete, was as nice as he sounded on the phone. He loaded up her car and drove her to the only garage in town. The mechanic, a guy about her dad's age, looked at her engine and shook his head. "Sorry, miss, but you're going to need a new alternator. I can get the part, but not until Monday morning. Nothing gets delivered to Cedar Ridge on weekends, especially not with this storm coming in." Lisa felt her heart sink. She had an important client meeting on Monday morning back in Denver. She worked as a marketing consultant, and this meeting could lead to her biggest contract yet, but there was nothing she could do about it now. "Is there a place to stay around here?" she asked, pulling her jacket tighter against the cold wind blowing through the open garage door. "May's Bed and Breakfast is your best bet. It's the only place to stay unless you want to drive to the next town over, but I wouldn't recommend that in this weather." Lisa thanked him and walked the few blocks to May's place. The bed and breakfast looked exactly like what you'd expect. An old Victorian house painted yellow with white trim, a wraparound porch, and a sign that creaked in the wind. While Lisa was dealing with her car troubles, David was having his own problems about 10 miles away. He'd been driving around the Colorado mountains for 2 weeks, taking pictures for a book about small mountain towns. His camera bag was full of beautiful shots. Golden aspen leaves, misty mornings, old barns against mountain backdrops. David loved this kind of work. After years of taking wedding photos and corporate headshots, he'd finally saved enough money to work on projects he actually cared about. This book was his chance to show people the beauty of places they might never visit otherwise. But his rental cabin reservation had gotten messed up somehow. He'd called the rental company 3 times, and each time they told him something different. First they said the cabin was double booked. Then they said there was a plumbing problem. Finally, they admitted they'd just made a mistake and didn't have anywhere else to put him. The customer service person on the phone sounded genuinely sorry, but couldn't offer much help. "We can refund your money, but I know that doesn't help you right now. Maybe try calling some bed and breakfast in the area?" David had already been driving for an hour looking for somewhere to stay when the snow started falling. His GPS led him to Cedar Ridge, where he hoped to find a room for the weekend. He parked outside May's Bed and Breakfast and grabbed his camera bag and overnight case. The warm smell of cinnamon and coffee hit him as soon as he walked through the front door. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the front desk. "You must be looking for a room," May said with a smile. "Let me guess, car trouble or reservation problems?" "Reservation problems," David said. "I'm hoping you have something available for the weekend." May's smile faded a little. "Well, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is I do have my best room available, the suite upstairs with the mountain view. The bad news is, well..." Just then, Lisa walked through the front door, shaking snow off her jacket. She looked tired and frustrated, her dark hair damp from the snow. "Excuse me," Lisa said to May. "The mechanic at the garage sent me here. I need a room for the weekend while my car gets fixed." May looked between Lisa and David, and her expression became apologetic. "This is the problem I was about to explain. I've got a family emergency that took 2 of my staff away unexpectedly, and with the storm, I'm running this place by myself tonight. I've only got 1 room ready, my honeymoon suite upstairs." Lisa and David looked at each other for the first time. Lisa noticed he had kind eyes and was holding what looked like expensive camera equipment. David noticed she looked professional but stressed, like someone whose carefully planned day had just fallen apart. "I can sleep in my car," David offered immediately. In this weather? Absolutely not, May said firmly. You'd freeze. And the storm's supposed to get worse tonight. Lisa felt awkward but also practical. Look, we're both adults. The room probably has a couch or something, right? May nodded. It's got a sitting area with a couch, but honestly it's not very comfortable for sleeping. The room was designed for, well, couples. But it does have a very large bed. David and Lisa looked at each other again. Neither of them had many options. I'm David, he said, extending his hand. Lisa, she replied, shaking it. I promise I'm not weird or dangerous, David laughed. Same here. I mean, I'm a photographer, so I'm probably a little weird, but not dangerous weird. May watched this exchange with interest. In her 40 years of running the bed and breakfast, she'd seen all kinds of situations. Something told her this might be one of those stories she'd remember for a long time. All right then, May said, pulling out her registration book. I'll give you folks my best rate since you're sharing. The room has a private bathroom, mountain view, and I'll bring up some extra pillows and blankets. As they filled out the paperwork, May explained that dinner was served in the dining room until 8 o'clock, and breakfast started at 7. She also mentioned that the storm was expected to last through Sunday, which meant they'd probably all be stuck in Cedar Ridge for the whole weekend. Lisa felt her phone buzz with a text from her assistant asking about Monday's meeting. She'd have to call her client in the morning and hope they'd understand. David was already thinking about the photos he could take if the storm cleared. Fresh snow on the mountains would be beautiful. May handed them an old-fashioned key attached to a small wooden block. Room 7, top of the stairs, last door on the right. It's my favorite room in the house. I think you'll find it quite comfortable. As they walked up the creaky wooden stairs together, Lisa and David were both wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Neither of them had ever shared a room with a complete stranger before. But with the snow still falling outside and no other options, they were about to find out what the next few days would bring. Lisa stood in the doorway of room 7, staring at what May had called her honeymoon suite. The room was beautiful, she had to admit. Soft yellow walls, antique furniture, and a huge window that looked out over the snow-covered mountains. But right in the center of it all was one very large bed with a fluffy white comforter and about 6 pillows. David stepped in behind her, carrying his camera bag and a small suitcase. He whistled softly. Well, May wasn't kidding about the mountain view. Yeah, it's really pretty, Lisa agreed, still staring at the bed. She felt her cheeks getting warm and hoped David wouldn't notice. They stood there for a moment, both thinking the same thing but not wanting to say it out loud. Finally, David cleared his throat. So, I can definitely sleep on that couch over there, he said, pointing to a small love seat by the window. It looked like it was made more for decoration than actual sitting. Lisa looked at the tiny couch and then at David, who was probably 6 feet tall. That thing? You'd end up sleeping in a pretzel shape. Your back would be killing you by morning. I'll be fine, David insisted, even though he was already imagining how uncomfortable it would be. Look, Lisa said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. We're both adults here. The bed is huge. We can just stay on our own sides and pretend there's a wall down the middle. David nodded slowly, like a hotel room with twin beds but bigger. Exactly. Lisa opened her small suitcase and pulled out her pajamas, then realized David was still standing there. Oh, do you want to use the bathroom first? Sure, thanks. David grabbed his toiletry bag and disappeared into the bathroom. While he was gone, Lisa looked around the room more carefully. There was a small table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf full of old novels, and a mini fridge that was humming quietly. She walked over to the window and watched the snow falling in the light from the street lamps below. It was actually kind of peaceful, even if the situation was weird. She heard the bathroom door open and turned around. David had changed into a plain t-shirt and pajama pants. His hair was a little messy from washing his face, and Lisa found herself thinking he looked younger and less serious than when she'd first met him downstairs. Bathroom's all yours, he said, sitting down on the edge of the bed to check his phone. Lisa grabbed her things and headed for the bathroom. It was old-fashioned but clean, with a clawfoot tub and a mirror surrounded by little light bulbs. She changed quickly and brushed her teeth, trying not to think about how strange this whole day had been. When she came out, David was sitting at the small table with his laptop open, editing photos. The screen showed a beautiful shot of aspen trees with golden leaves against a blue sky. Wow, that's really good, Lisa said, looking over his shoulder without thinking about it. David smiled. Thanks, I took it last week up near Breckenridge. I'm working on a book about small mountain towns. That sounds amazing. Way more interesting than what I do. What do you do? Lisa sat down in the other chair. Marketing consulting. Basically, I help companies figure out how to sell their stuff better. Not exactly artistic, but you must be good at it if you're traveling for work, I guess. I mean, I like the problem-solving part of it, and I get to travel sometimes, which is nice. Lisa paused. Though this wasn't exactly the kind of travel day I had planned. David laughed. Yeah, I bet. Car trouble is the worst. What happened? Alternator died. I probably should have gotten it fixed weeks ago, but you know how it is. You keep putting things off until they become a big problem. I definitely know how that is. I've been meaning to get new tires for my car since spring. They talked for a while about cars and travel and work. Lisa found herself relaxing a little. David seemed normal and nice, not like some of the weird guys she'd met online dating. Not that this was a date or anything, she reminded herself quickly. Around 9 o'clock, they both started yawning. The stress of the day and the warm room were making them sleepy. So, how do we want to handle this? Lisa asked, looking at the bed. David stood up and grabbed some of the extra pillows May had brought up. How about I build a little wall down the middle? That way we both have our own space. Good idea. Lisa helped him arrange the pillows in a line down the center of the bed. It looked a little silly, but it made her feel better. David went to the left side of the bed and Lisa went to the right. They both got under the covers, staying as close to their respective edges as possible. Good night. Lisa, David said quietly. Good night, David. Lisa lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind blowing outside and the old house settling around them. This was definitely the weirdest night of her life. She was sharing a bed with a complete stranger in a town she'd never heard of before today. But somehow it didn't feel scary or wrong. David seemed like a genuinely good person. She could hear him breathing steadily beside her. And after a while, it actually became kind of comforting. Like having a roommate or something. Lisa had always been a light sleeper, especially in new places. But the combination of stress, the warm room, and the sound of snow hitting the windows eventually made her drowsy. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. Sometime in the middle of the night, Lisa woke up feeling cold. The old heating system in the bed and breakfast had apparently decided to take a break. She could see her breath in the dim light coming through the window. She was about to get up to find more blankets when she realized something. The pillow wall was still there, but somehow during the night both she and David had moved toward the center of the bed. Not touching, but definitely closer than they'd started. David seemed to be asleep, but she could tell he was cold too. He had pulled his blanket up over his head and was curled up in a ball. Lisa lay there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. She was freezing, and she could tell David was too, even in his sleep. The practical part of her brain said that sharing body heat was just basic survival. People did it all the time in emergency situations. She quietly scooted a tiny bit closer to the middle of the bed, not enough to wake David up, but enough to feel a little warmer. Almost immediately, she felt better. A few minutes later, David shifted in his sleep and moved slightly closer too. Lisa held her breath, but he didn't wake up. They still weren't touching, but the space between them was much smaller now. Lisa smiled to herself in the dark. Tomorrow would probably be awkward, but right now she was finally warm enough to fall back asleep. And somehow having David nearby made the strange situation feel less weird and more like an adventure. Lisa woke up to the sound of wind howling outside the window. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the broken car, the bed and breakfast, and David sleeping next to her. She turned her head carefully and saw him still curled up on his side of the bed, breathing quietly. The pillow wall between them had gotten a little messed up during the night, but they were still on their respective sides. Lisa felt relieved and maybe a tiny bit disappointed, though she didn't want to think about why. She slipped out of bed quietly and walked to the window. What she saw made her gasp. The world outside looked completely different from yesterday. Snow was piled up against the window and more was falling so hard she could barely see the houses across the street. The wind was bending the tree branches back and forth like they were dancing. Wow, David's voice came from behind her. She turned and saw him sitting up in bed, his hair sticking up in about 5 different directions. I don't think anyone's going anywhere today, Lisa said, pointing at the window. David got up and joined her at the window. I've seen a lot of mountain storms, but this is something else. Look at that snow. It must be 3 feet deep already. They stood there for a minute watching the storm. Lisa was very aware that David was standing close enough that she could smell his soap from the night before. It was nice, clean, and simple. I should probably call my client and cancel Monday's meeting, Lisa said, stepping away from the window. This storm doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon. Yeah, I need to call the rental car company too. They're going to love hearing about this. They took turns using the bathroom and getting dressed. Lisa put on jeans and a sweater while David wore khaki pants and a flannel shirt that made his eyes look greener. Downstairs, May was in the kitchen making breakfast. She looked tired, and Lisa noticed she was moving more slowly than yesterday. "Morning, you two," May said with a smile. "I hope you slept okay despite the cold. The heating system is older than dirt, and storms like this always seem to make it cranky." "We were fine," Lisa said quickly. "Is there anything we can do to help you?" "You look like you could use it." May's face brightened. "Well, that's very sweet of you to offer. My arthritis is acting up with this weather, and I've got 3 other rooms with guests who'll want breakfast." "I can cook," David said. "My grandmother taught me how to make a pretty good breakfast. And I can help serve or clean up," Lisa added. May looked like she might cry. "You know, I've been running this place for 40 years, and guests like you two are the reason I still love doing it." For the next hour, the 3 of them worked together in the kitchen. David turned out to be a really good cook. He made pancakes that were fluffy and perfect, scrambled eggs that weren't too dry, and bacon that was crispy but not burned. Lisa helped him by setting tables and making coffee, and May directed them both while sitting at the kitchen table. The other guests were a retired couple from Texas and a businessman who seemed annoyed about being stuck. But when they tasted David's breakfast, everyone's mood improved. After the breakfast rush, May showed Lisa and David around the bed and breakfast. The house was over 100 years old, and May knew the story of every room and every piece of furniture. "This place has seen a lot of love stories over the years," May said as they walked through the parlor. "Honeymoon couples, anniversary celebrations, and sometimes people who meet here." Unexpectedly, she led them to a bookshelf in the corner that was full of leather-bound journals. "These are guest books from couples who stayed here and then came back to tell me their stories. Some people met here during storms just like this one. Others came here for their honeymoon and still send me Christmas cards 30 years later." Lisa picked up one of the journals and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with handwritten stories and photos. One page had a picture of a young couple standing in front of the bed and breakfast, both covered in snow and laughing. "We got engaged during a blizzard in room 7, the caption read. May made us hot chocolate and told us stories about other couples who found love here. We knew this was a special place. Room 7, Lisa said quietly. "That's our room." "It's my most popular room for romantic getaways," May said with a knowing smile. "Something about that mountain view and the way the morning light comes through the window. I've had 6 proposals in that room over the years." David and Lisa looked at each other, both feeling a little awkward. They weren't a romantic couple. They were just 2 strangers sharing a room. But something about being in a place with so much love and history made the air feel different. The storm continued all day, so they spent time in the parlor reading books and talking. Lisa discovered that David had traveled all over the country for his photography. He told her stories about getting caught in thunderstorms in Kansas and watching the sunrise over the Grand Canyon. "I always wanted to travel more," Lisa said. "But with work, it's hard to find time for the kind of trips I really want to take." "What kind of trips do you want to take?" Lisa thought for a minute. "I've always wanted to go to small towns like this one and write about them. Not for marketing or business, just because they're interesting. Every little place has stories, you know?" David nodded. "That's exactly why I love what I do. People think small towns are boring, but they're wrong. Some of the most interesting people I've ever met live in places most people drive right past." As the afternoon went on, they found themselves talking more easily. David showed Lisa more of his photos on his laptop, and she was amazed by how he could make ordinary things look beautiful. A rusty old truck became art when he photographed it with mountains in the background. An elderly woman sitting on her porch looked like she had 1,000 stories to tell. "You have a real gift," Lisa said. "These photos make me want to visit all these places." "Maybe you could," David said. "I mean, if you really want to write travel stories, there's nothing stopping you except yourself." Lisa felt something shift inside her chest. When was the last time someone had encouraged her dreams instead of telling her to be practical? That evening, they helped May with dinner again. David made soup while Lisa baked cornbread from a recipe May's mother had written on a card in 1952. The kitchen felt warm and cozy, while the storm raged outside. When they went to bed that night, they rebuilt the pillow wall, but it was smaller than before. As Lisa lay there listening to the wind, she found herself thinking about what David had said about following her dreams. Maybe he was right. Maybe she could find a way to do the kind of writing she really wanted to do. "David," she said quietly into the dark. "Yeah? Thanks for encouraging me earlier. About the travel writing. Most people think it's silly. It's not silly at all. You should do things that make you happy." Lisa smiled in the dark. Tomorrow was Sunday, and they'd probably still be snowed in. She was starting to think that might not be such a bad thing. Lisa woke up slowly on Sunday morning, feeling more rested than she had in weeks. The room was quiet except for the gentle sound of David breathing beside her. Sunlight was streaming through the window, which meant the storm had finally stopped. She turned her head carefully and found herself looking directly at David's face. He was sleeping peacefully, his hair messy and one hand resting on the pillow between them. Without thinking about it, Lisa realized her own hand was lying very close to his, almost touching. For a moment, she just watched him sleep. In the morning light, she could see small details she hadn't noticed before. A tiny scar near his left eye, probably from childhood. The way his eyelashes were longer than most guys. The fact that he looked younger and less serious when he was relaxed. Lisa felt her heart do something funny in her chest. This was dangerous territory, she told herself. They were strangers who had been thrown together by accident. In a few hours, the roads would be clear and they'd both go back to their regular lives. She needed to remember that. But as she started to pull her hand away, David's fingers moved slightly and brushed against hers. Even though he was still asleep, he didn't pull away. Lisa held her breath, not wanting to wake him but not wanting to move either. After a few minutes, David's eyes opened slowly. When he saw Lisa looking at him, he smiled. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Good morning." The storm stopped. David glanced toward the window where bright sunlight was making the fresh snow sparkle like diamonds. "Looks like it. That's good news for getting back to the real world." "Yeah," Lisa said, though she realized she didn't sound very excited about it. They lay there for another moment, both aware that their hands were almost touching, but neither one moving away. Finally, David sat up and stretched. "I should check on the road conditions," he said, reaching for his phone. While David called the highway department, Lisa got dressed and went downstairs to find May. The older woman was in the kitchen, moving around much better than yesterday. "Feeling better?" Lisa asked. "Much better, thank you. That storm always makes my joints ache, but when it passes, I feel like myself again." May poured Lisa a cup of coffee. "The roads will be clear by this afternoon. I suppose you and David will be eager to get back to your regular lives." Lisa sipped her coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the snow-covered town. "I suppose so." May studied her face carefully. "You don't sound very sure about that. It's just been nice here, peaceful, different from my usual routine. And David? He seems like a nice young man." Lisa felt her cheeks getting warm. "He is nice. We've had some good conversations." May smiled knowingly. "I've been running this place for 40 years, dear. I've seen that look before. It's the look people get when they've found something unexpected and aren't sure what to do about it." Before Lisa could respond, David came into the kitchen with his laptop. "Good news and bad news," he said. "Good news is the main roads will be clear by 2 o'clock. Bad news is my rental car company can't get me a replacement until tomorrow morning." "Oh no," Lisa said, surprised by how relieved she felt. "That means you're stuck here another night." "Looks like it. If May has room for me, that is." May looked between them with that same knowing smile. "I think we can work something out." They spent the morning helping May with cleanup from the storm. David shoveled the front walkway while Lisa helped reorganize the parlor and dust the furniture. Working together felt natural now, like they'd been doing it for years instead of just 2 days. In the afternoon, they walked around the town together. The snow was knee-deep in some places, but the main streets had been plowed. Cedar Ridge looked like a picture postcard, with icicles hanging from the roof edges and smoke coming from chimneys. David brought his camera and took pictures of everything. The old church with its steeple covered in snow, kids building a snowman in the park, An elderly man feeding birds from his front porch. You should take some pictures too, David said, handing Lisa his camera. For your travel writing. I don't know how to use something this fancy. It's easier than you think. Here, I'll show you. David stood behind Lisa and put his hands over hers to guide the camera. She could feel the warmth of his chest against her back and smell his cologne. Her heart started beating faster, but she tried to focus on what he was teaching her. See how the light hits that building there? Try to capture that. Lisa looked through the viewfinder and saw what David meant. The afternoon sun was making the snow on the old library roof glow like gold. Got it, she said, pressing the button. When they looked at the picture on the camera's display, David whistled. That's really good. You have a natural eye for this. Beginner's luck. No, I'm serious. Look how you framed it with those trees. That's not luck, that's instinct. They spent an hour walking around town with Lisa taking pictures and David giving her tips. She found herself seeing things differently through the camera lens, noticing the way shadows fell across the snow, how the mountains looked different from various angles. As the sun started to set, they ended up at a small park at the edge of town. There was a bench facing the mountains and they sat down to rest. I can't believe this weekend actually happened, Lisa said. 3 days ago, I didn't know this town existed. I didn't know you existed. I know what you mean. I've been traveling alone for so long. I forgot what it was like to share experiences with someone. They sat quietly for a while, watching the sky turn pink and orange behind the mountains. David, Lisa said finally, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why are you really doing this photography project? I mean the real reason, not the professional one. David was quiet for a long moment. My last relationship ended pretty badly about a year ago. She said I was always working, never present, that I cared more about my career than about people. She wasn't wrong. I threw myself into work after that, but I realized I was lonely. Really lonely. This project was supposed to help me figure out what I actually wanted from life. Lisa nodded. I understand that feeling. I've been so focused on building my business that I haven't made time for much else. Friends, relationships, the things that actually matter. What do you think matters? David asked. Lisa thought about the question. Connection, I guess. Finding people who understand you. Doing work that feels meaningful instead of just profitable. Yeah, that sounds right. As they walked back to the bed and breakfast, Lisa felt like something important was happening, but she couldn't name what it was. All she knew was that the thought of David leaving tomorrow made her chest feel tight. That evening, they had dinner with May and the other guests. Everyone was talking about leaving in the morning, making plans, exchanging contact information. But Lisa and David were quiet, lost in their own thoughts. When they went up to their room, they went through their usual routine, taking turns in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. But everything felt different now, charged with something unspoken. I guess we don't need the pillow wall anymore, Lisa said as they stood on opposite sides of the bed, since you're leaving tomorrow. David looked at the pillows they'd been using as a barrier. I guess not. They got into bed, still on their respective sides, but without the pillows between them. The space felt enormous and tiny at the same time. Lisa? David said into the darkness. Yeah? I'm glad my reservation got messed up. Lisa smiled in the dark. I'm glad my car broke down. Are you really? Lisa thought about it. 3 days ago, she would have called this the worst weekend of her life. But now, lying here next to David, she realized it might actually be one of the best. Yeah, she said softly. I really am. This time, when they moved closer together in their sleep, it wasn't because they were cold. Monday morning came too quickly. Lisa woke up to find herself curled up next to David, her head resting on his shoulder. His arm was around her, and for a moment, she let herself enjoy the feeling of being close to someone who made her feel safe and happy. David was already awake, looking down at her with a soft smile. Good morning, he whispered. Good morning. Lisa didn't move away immediately. I guess this is it. Back to the real world. I guess so. But neither of them seemed eager to get up. They lay there for a few more minutes, both knowing that once they left this room, everything would change. Finally, the sound of May bustling around downstairs made them sit up. They had to face reality eventually. Lisa's car was ready and David's rental car replacement had arrived. They packed their bags slowly, putting off the inevitable goodbye. Downstairs, May was waiting with coffee and homemade muffins. I hate to see you two go, she said, hugging them both. You've been the best house guests I've had in years, and I have a feeling your story isn't over yet." Lisa and David exchanged phone numbers, but it felt awkward and formal after everything they'd shared. "What do you say to someone who's become important to you in just 4 days?" "I'll call you," David said as they stood next to their cars. "Yeah, me too," Lisa replied. They hugged goodbye, and Lisa felt like she was leaving a piece of herself behind in Cedar Ridge. The drive back to Denver felt endless. Lisa's apartment looked exactly the same, but she felt completely different. She kept thinking about David's laugh, the way he'd encouraged her photography, how natural it had felt to work together in May's kitchen. She threw herself into work, trying to forget about the weekend. She rescheduled her client meeting and managed to save the contract. Her assistant complimented her on seeming more relaxed and creative than usual. But every time her phone rang, Lisa hoped it was David. On Tuesday evening, her phone finally buzzed with a text from him. "Hey, how was your meeting today?" Lisa smiled for the first time since leaving Cedar Ridge. "It went great. How's the photography project going?" "Good, but I keep thinking about those pictures you took." "You really should consider doing that travel writing." They texted back and forth for an hour, sharing details about their days. It felt easy and natural, like they were still sitting in May's parlor talking. On Wednesday, David called instead of texting. "I have a weird question," he said. "There's an art gallery opening this Friday night in Denver. I'm supposed to photograph it for a magazine, but honestly, I hate going to these things alone. Want to come with me? You mentioned you liked art but never went to gallery events." Lisa's heart jumped. "Are you asking me as your photographer assistant or as your date?" David laughed. "I was hoping for option 2, but I'll take whatever you're comfortable with." Option 2 sounds perfect. Friday night, Lisa spent way too much time getting ready. She chose a simple black dress and heels, then changed into jeans and a nice top. Then back to the dress. When David picked her up, the look in his eyes told her she'd made the right choice. "You look beautiful," he said, and Lisa felt her cheeks get warm. The gallery opening was crowded and loud, but Lisa found she enjoyed watching David work. He had a way of making people feel comfortable while he photographed them. Between shots, he introduced her to artists and other photographers, always mentioning her interest in travel writing. "You should meet Janet," he told one gallery owner. "She's working on some really interesting travel pieces about small mountain towns." Lisa was amazed at how David supported her dreams, even though they barely knew each other. Afterward, they went to a quiet coffee shop and talked until it closed. Lisa told David about her idea to start a travel blog, and he offered to provide photos for her articles. "We could be partners," he said. "You write, I'll photograph. We could travel to small towns together and tell their stories." "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I've been thinking about it since Cedar Ridge. We work well together." Over the next few weeks, they saw each other almost every day. Sometimes it was for work, planning their travel blog, looking at David's photos, researching interesting towns to visit. But mostly they just enjoyed being together. They discovered they both loved old movies and terrible reality TV shows. David introduced Lisa to hiking, and she introduced him to farmers markets. They cooked dinner together, with David teaching Lisa his grandmother's recipes and Lisa showing him how to make bread from scratch. 3 months later, Lisa made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She gave her biggest client 2 months' notice and decided to freelance part-time so she could focus on travel writing. "Are you sure about this?" her friend Rachel asked over lunch. "You're giving up financial security for a guy you met 4 months ago." "I'm not doing it for David," Lisa explained. "I'm doing it for me. He just helped me remember what I actually wanted." David was equally supportive when Lisa told him about her decision. "I'm proud of you," he said, pulling her into a hug. "It takes courage to change your whole life," says the guy who drives around the country taking pictures of small towns for a living. "Hey, that's different." I was already crazy. Their first official travel writing trip was to a tiny town in Utah called Millfield. They spent 3 days interviewing locals, photographing the landscape and writing about the town's history. Lisa's article, paired with David's stunning photos, was picked up by a major travel magazine. "We make a good team," David said as they celebrated at a diner that had been serving the same pie recipe since 1952. "Yeah, we do." 6 months after Cedar Ridge, they were sitting in Lisa's apartment working on their blog when David suddenly closed his laptop. "I have an idea," he said. "What kind of idea?" "A crazy idea. What if we went back to Cedar Ridge? Not for work, just to visit May and see the place again. Lisa felt her heart speed up. That's not crazy. That's perfect. 2 weeks later, they drove back to Cedar Ridge together. May greeted them like family, immediately bringing out photo albums and asking about their travel blog. I knew you two would end up together, she said with satisfaction. I could see it that first night when you were both trying so hard to be polite about sharing the room. That evening, they sat in the same spot in the parlor where they'd first really talked. But this time, David was holding Lisa's hand. Can I tell you something? Lisa said. Of course, that weekend when my car broke down. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. David squeezed her hand. Even better than getting your biggest client? Even better than that. Later that night, they walked back to room 7 together. The same room where they'd built a pillow wall and tried to stay on opposite sides of the bed. Remember how awkward this was the first time? Lisa asked, looking at the bed. I remember thinking you were beautiful but being too nervous to say anything. You thought I was beautiful? I was such a mess that first night. You were stressed, not messy. And yes, I thought you were beautiful. I still think you're beautiful. They got ready for bed together, no awkwardness this time. When they climbed into bed, there was no pillow wall and no hesitation about being close. Lisa, David said in the darkness, yeah? I love you. Lisa felt her heart fill up completely. I love you too. A year later, they returned to Cedar Ridge again. This time, David had a ring in his pocket and a plan to propose in the parlor where they'd first fallen in love. But when he got down on one knee, all his planned words disappeared. Will you marry me? He asked simply. Yes, Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. Of course, yes, May cried when they told her the news. She insisted they have their wedding reception in the bed and breakfast garden, and she spent the next 6 months planning every detail. On their wedding day, Lisa wore her grandmother's dress and David wore his best suit. May officiated the ceremony, and their vows included promises to keep traveling together and telling the stories of small towns across the country. That night, they stayed in room 7 one more time as husband and wife. Remember what you said that first Sunday night? David asked as they lay in bed. About there being only one bed? Lisa laughed. I said I didn't mind anymore. Well, I hope you still don't mind, because I plan on sharing a bed with you for the rest of our lives. I wouldn't have it any other way. Outside their window, snow began to fall gently, just like it had that first magical weekend when two strangers found love in the most unexpected place.